me I had a lot of friends in Minneapolis. Very nice. No, it's great to be here, and thank you, Michele, so much for that nice introduction. And besides, now I don't have to talk about the fit. She has that speech down pretty well already. Michele does come to my luncheons, and several months ago, maybe 6 or 8, she said, "When are you coming to Minneapolis?" I said, "Oh, I'm too busy. I can't do it. I have all this." So I kept putting her off and putting her off. But she has perseverance. Every week it was the same question. Then I'm on the hot spot. "When are you coming? When are you coming?" This set the day. This set the day. So, Michele, I'm glad you got me here. Thank you. Done well, and Michele mentioned about auditing the Fed, and that was done not by me. I'm not very good at twisting arms. Besides, I have nothing to trade in Washington anyway. But I went to you and said, if you believe in something, talk to your members of Congress. And evidently, a lot of people did throughout the country. But I do want to recognize one individual here. I assume he's here tonight, and that's John Covasini, who got more petitions than anybody else put together to pass his audit the Fed bill, and I want to thank him personally for that. Once again, Marianne Stebbins for her very important work here and keeping the organization going. Marianne, thank you very much. Give me Jeff Frazee, the National Coordinator for the Young Americans for Liberty, and I consider his work very, very important, working with the universities, and that has been a sort of his organization, a spin-off from the Campaign for Liberty. But I really believe long-term that's going to be one of the most important organizations, Young Americans for Liberty. I do believe the revolution is alive and well, and I have heard that the revolution is alive and well in city politics here in Minneapolis. Jeff has done an exceptionally good job, and I think that's going to continue. The universities are where the revolution really occurs. If you think about the TV images of the various countries where people get finally fed up with their government, where are the major demonstrations where the people get the backbone and they say, "I've had enough," because it's the young generations who understand what they're inheriting, and they say no more, and they so often lead the charge. So I am very grateful for those of you that are in the universities or interested in this cause of liberty, because I believe that's where the action is. Thank you for joining us. You know, not too long ago, there was a little incident on the House floor about somebody telling a lie. I don't know if anybody remembers hearing that or not. And I wasn't exactly happy with that incident at all. But it made me think more about other kind of lying. It's called the noble lie. The noble lie has been around since ancient times, since Socrates, and the proposal is that the understanding of the noble lie is that governments are obligated to lie. It's in their interest to lie. If they tell lie, because only the smart people get in government, they have to lie to the average person because he can't handle his own affairs. And this is what happens in so many governments. It's happening in ours continuously. But in order to lie to you, what they have to do is stir up fear and get you fearful. What did they do when the financial crisis hit? They wanted to build up fear. They scare everybody, scare the people, say you have to pass something, do this, and have the panic. Whether it's the financial panic, or whether it's 9/11, or whether it's getting you psychologically conditioned to start another war, they're always wanting to build up fear. So we have to be on guard, and we have to make sure what our government tells us is the truth, and we should never go to war if they're telling us a lie about what's happening. a resolution on the House floor, and it was essentially a declaration of war against Iraq. And that was early on. It took 5 years, took the conditions to mold, and finally we went to war because we took the position over my strong objection, and we took the position that we had to have regime change in Iraq. And that, of course, finally came about. But on this very day, in the city of Pittsburgh, what are they doing? They're pumping up the next war. They've all of a sudden decided, and they're using the same rhetoric, the same fear-mongering terms that, you know what, we've known about this. In Iran, they have this nuclear reactor that they're working, and they're refining nuclear power. The truth is they've had it for a long time. And the UN has known about it, and it's just stirring up fears. What they're getting ready to do is put very, very strong sanctions on Iran. Now, they want to do this. Now, listening to the reasoning of the reason why we're supposed to do this, we want to make sure they don't import any gasoline. Now, they can't even make their own gasoline. And we think they're going to get a intercontinental ballistic missile and nuclear weapons and shoot them at us, and we have to have anti-nuclear weapons, anti-missiles in Europe, and all this nonsense is nothing more than stirring up the military-industrial complex in order to get us involved. They did that leading up to the war in Iraq, and now they're moving once again. But sanctions and blockades and prevention like this is an act of war. But you know, if they can't even make gasoline for themselves, how can they possibly be a threat to us? But it's once again, it's to stir up the fear. You know, what should we do to prevent this from happening again, since it happens over and over and over again? How many times have we gone to war without a declaration? Why don't we just follow the Constitution and make sure Congress declares the war before we go to war? Maybe then we'll be committed, we know who the enemy is, and we know where the end point is. We've been in Afghanistan now 50% longer than World War I and World War II put together, and there's no signs of us coming home. The debate now going on is, how many more troops are we going to send over? 20,000 or 40,000? We elected a president that was running on as a peace candidate. He was going to bring troops home. Oh, sure, he brought a couple thousand home from Iraq, sent many, many more thousand of contractors over, and now he's sending a few more military back. That war isn't ending, and they're getting ready to send more troops into Afghanistan, stirring up trouble with Iran, and bombing Pakistan. It makes no sense whatsoever. The burden falls on us, on the people, on the taxpayers, on the next generation. At the rate they're going, they're liable to reinstate the draft, and that we should never permit. But in Afghanistan, the same thing continues and continues. Every time we go over and we drop a bomb, we'll hear, okay, we killed 15 terrorists. Maybe we did. But we killed 15 foreigners, I know that, and every single family then has a religious obligation to kill an American. So if we ever want to have peace, and if we ever want to be more safe and more secure and not waste our energy and waste our resources and bankrupt this country, what we have to do is we have to look to the founders for an idea about the proper foreign policy. The proper foreign policy under the Constitution is non-intervention and mind our own business. Troops home from the Middle East. We would come home from Iraq. We would be sending more troops to Afghanistan, stirring up war in Pakistan, trying to fight with the Iranians. But we'd do more than that. We're broke. Our national debt's going up $2 trillion this year. We're broke. We don't have the money. We can't borrow much more. Matter of fact, the foreigners are lending us money a lot slower these days, but we're printing the money. But I say, to get to the bottom of this, I don't propose that we cut child health care right now, even though that's not the proper way to deliver child health care, and there's a better way. But I say, don't go after child health care or the elderly, care for the elderly. I say, bring all the troops home from Japan and Korea and Europe. Whether it is domestic spending or foreign affairs spending in the military, none of it could happen if you had sound money. If they had to collect every penny they spend on the welfare state and running our empire, and they came to you and taxed you, your tax would be 50 or 60%. Who knows? The revolution would get a real boost, I'll tell you that. Because the people could pay it and would pay it. So it is nothing more than deceit. It's the use of a technique called counterfeiting, and it will lead to destruction. We have now brought the financial system down. The financial system is in chaos and continues to be. This nonsense that it's over with is just that. It's nonsense. But the next shoe to fall is not just maybe commercial property and a few other things. The next big thing to fall is the dollar. You just can't print dollars the way we are and maintain the dollar, and the collapse of the dollar will be a mixed blessing, because I think what will happen is the continuation of the loss of credibility in Washington will, be epidemic. Nobody will believe anything they tell us anymore. And also they will say, if you're sending us checks that bounce, it's about time we quit sending you any money at all. So often what they do is they start with small amounts, incrementalism. Medical care is the same thing. Incrementally increasing the role of government. Education. Start back in the 50s. Before you know it, they totally control our schools, and now they're moving up from 65% control of medical care to even more. But it's always incrementalism. Now, when they introduced the income tax, of course, that was a bad year. The same year they gave us the Federal Reserve. But they said, don't worry about it. It's only the wealthy people, the people who made $100,000, which is a tremendous amount of money, and only be 1%. Now let me tell you why it's bad to concede, whether it's a little bit of here on food stamps or a little bit of foreign intervention. Yeah, non-intervention overseas sounds good, but on this occasion we have to do it. Because once you give it up just a little bit, like 1% of your income tax, that's, this all pay 1%. That means you've given up 100% of the principal. The ideas account. That's why it would have been real nice if they had put it in the Constitution that we could have no deficit financing. But once you can have a little bit, you can have a lot. Once you can print a little bit of money, they print too much. But the good news is the credibility has been lost already to a large degree. People are sick and tired of what they're getting, and I say that is good news, because they're directing their attention to Washington and their representatives in Congress, and I think that is very healthy. But we still have a long way to go. Where I'm optimistic is when I go to the universities and talk to the young people and go around the country, because something is indeed stirring. It's very important that we know and understand what liberty is all about. But it's very important also that we understand that in Washington, we haven't gained a whole lot yet. We're still losing most of the votes. And unfortunately, even when we finally, as Republicans, got control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, sadly, we didn't do a very good job. Right now, the people are getting so upset with the current administration, it may be that the Republicans will get a boost in the arm next year, and that's a pretty good idea. I think if both parties stand for the same thing, changing leadership every so often wouldn't hurt a thing. But even if you get the two parties close together, a little bit of gridlock wouldn't hurt us either, you know, where they just don't get anything passed. But you know, in foreign policy they scare us, and economic policy they scare us, but after 9/11, it was a disastrous time, and there were reasons for us to be deeply concerned, and I don't want to belittle that. But it was also an opportunity for the people who love big government. They like to take advantage of these issues. The Patriot Act was around a long time before 9/11. They never could get it passed, but once there was a crisis, boom, the Patriot Act, over my strong objection, was passed within 24 hours without really debating the issue. No, the Patriot Act did not give you more liberty. You cannot solve the problem of terrorist threat in this country by continuing with our foreign policy. If you think you can, then there's a misunderstanding about the nature of what we're doing. And I think the best analogy I can use for trying to get people who disagree with this idea to understand this. What if another nation was stronger than we are and they sent their troops to our land? What if they looked different and had a different language? What if they happened to be Chinese? What if they came over here and said they're protecting the oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and they come in and they occupy our territory and they want to teach us how to live? Different religion, different language, and different color, and different philosophy. The only thing I can say about that, if that happened, it sure would make certain that all of us believed in the Second Amendment. How people think that we can do that to other countries and not have the same reaction. We should never take it casually that we're going to go and put anti-ballistic missiles, which it looks like they may back off. Instead of a few big ones, they're going to put many little ones. But anti-ballistic missiles in Europe, right on the border of Russia, because of, you know, the Iranian threat. That is bogus, let me tell you. But what if the Russians came in Canada or in Mexico and put anti-ballistic missile, let's say in Mexico, because I can make an appropriate analogy. The Russians are putting anti-ballistic missiles in Mexico because they're afraid the Americans will launch missiles and hit Venezuela. So we're protecting Venezuela. I mean, we wouldn't accept that. I mean, we would be infuriated, and yet that's what we do. The idea that we have to use force and intimidations to get along with people is ridiculous. It makes it more difficult. We should have, I like the idea of trade. I like the idea of travel. I like the idea of diplomacy. I don't like the idea of intimidation and force and threatening people. Do it our way or we'll bomb you. If you do it our way, we'll give you money. If you don't do it our way, we'll bomb you. There has to be a better way. Personal liberty is under attack. Under war times, it's always worse because everybody is frightened, and therefore you have to give up your liberties because you have to be patriotic. But the patriot is said, today the patriot is considered to be the one that obeys and is obedient and doesn't question the government. I say the good patriot sticks with the people and questions the government. We approach with an authoritarian attitude. You can solve problems through authoritarianism or through voluntarism. In a free country, it's supposed to be voluntary. We recognize the right of the individual, the right to enter into contracts, the right for the obligation of the government to give us an honest money, and you work out our problems. That's what we're supposed to do. But today, it's all through the force of a gun. Now, I, of course, believe strongly in the Second Amendment, but I do believe in the restraint of the use of guns, and that is the government bureaucrats. They don't deserve to have that. There's approximately 100,000 federal employees that carry a gun to enforce the laws. They're getting frightened about what's happening in this country. But the whole thing is they're not supposed to have any federal policemen. The police are supposed to be local. They're supposed to be here in our communities. Are also very detrimental to our liberty. The one war that I've talked out against for so long and we have to continue to work on, and that is the drug war. We need to end the drug war. Isn't it amazing that we accept the idea that you have a perfectly good right to deal with your own salvation and what you believe in religious matters? You're also generally allowed to read the literature and intellectual literature and the right of the free press. But with political correctness on the horizon, sometimes that is even curtailed. But when it comes to spiritual values and intellectual matters, we accept a relative amount of freedom. But what happens when it comes to your own body? Your own body is the government is going to tell you everything. Tell you what you can smoke and drink and eat and everything else. I would say that in a free society, you should have the responsibility to make your own decision what is best for you. But if you make mistakes, you can't crawl to your government and go to your neighbor to get bailed out. As a physician and as a parent and a grandparent, I know the dangers of drugs, and I know we should be very, very careful with drugs. But also as a physician, I know that there's more people abused and more people die by prescription drugs than they do by the illegal drugs. But we also should put more emphasis, and I gave a 5-minute speech the other day on medical care, and making a point which isn't generally made in Washington, that the medical profession 100 years ago took us away from homeopathic medicine and said only allopathic medicine, the routine medicine. But any natural cures, they more or less closed these schools down. They didn't want the competition, and they limited the number of medical schools. And this was part in collusion with the AMA. The doctor organizations also promoted this. But what we're doing now is it's getting so that they intimidate you if you want to look for natural causes. I have introduced a bill which I thought at the time wasn't very much, but all of a sudden I found out that people cared about this. You know, there are restraints in allowing people to drink raw milk. And I think if you want to drink raw milk, you ought to have the right to drink raw milk. Nor the WTO controlling our vitamins and nutritional products, because they may give you better health than some of the conventional methods that we have today. You know, I have a little bumper sticker in my office. You may have seen it on the internet. It sort of summarizes the philosophy. It merely says, "Don't steal, the government hates competition." Done by theft, and yet the side that argues the case gets the moral high ground, and that's where we have to stop. We have to learn to understand how the market works and why freedom is so valuable to us, and that it is the only humanitarian system that we should argue for, because it was the free market and freedom and industrial revolution that actually was able to eliminate famine and poverty. And yet we are losing the argument. Conservatives and libertarians do not give a good case and say that if you truly care about your fellow man, what you ought to do is promote liberty and limited government, and more people will be taken care of better than any other way. Choice is very important, and pro-choice doesn't mean that in all areas. It's not how it's conventionally used. Freedom of choice means that you have freedom to use your life as you choose. You should have a right to your life. We do. We get a right to our life, and we have a right to our liberty. But it doesn't come from our government. It comes from our Creator, and not the government that should be able to take it. Right to life and right to liberty, we ought to have the right to keep what we earn, which means there would be no income tax. Now, H.L. Mencken said that, maybe there are some of you in this crowd, he said the most dangerous person in the world is the individual who thinks things out for himself. And I think that's what the Campaign Liberty has done. It's brought people together who have been thinking things out for themselves, because I didn't convert the people all of a sudden. I hope I encouraged a few now and then. But I think there has been a remnant. There has not just been the college kids and the young kids. There's been a remnant of people that knew about this, just searching and waiting to hear something because they wanted to come together, and we had an excuse for it to come together. But now, not only do we come together and have a good time and we're energized, but we also are coming together because we can see that if we continue this, we can change the whole nature of this country. C.S. Lewis once described the maturing of an individual as being like a good egg. You're born as a good egg. And he said a good egg can do one of two things. It can either hatch or rot. And he was using that as an analogy for each and every one of us as individuals to make sure our lives are worthwhile. But that's the way, I thought there might be a way of making an analogy to the freedom movement. The freedom movement has been around a long time. It's been asleep for a long time, and was certainly asleep in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, but it's always been there. And I guess if we allow it to, the good egg of the ideas of liberty could rot. But I don't believe that's happening. I think what we're witnessing today is the hatching of this good egg and the understanding of what liberty is all about and what America has been all about. The fortunate thing is that we have a pretty good tradition. When the Soviet system collapsed, which was a predictable event by the Austrian economists because socialized economies can't work, but intervention economy, the inflationism and the special interest economy that we have, and I always resent it when they say, well, we're running capitalism as opposed to all our problems, and free market said. So this is going to come to an end, but I think that we have a much better chance because our traditions have been better. At least we understood at one time what property rights really meant. I don't think we have much respect for property rights. If you own any land, have you ever noticed that you can't even use it without asking a lot of people what you can do, from local government all the way up to the federal government, to decide what you can do or can't do. Private property ownership is very important. So if we have a major crisis, which I anticipate will come, at least we ought to know what we believe in. We have to believe that we can restart this whole program in a much better way. But I believe the crisis will come because we're going to have a dollar crisis. When the dollar fails, that means the government checks bounce. And when the checks bounce, there will be very little reason for people to be dedicated and worrying too much about the federal government. It will be almost like de facto secession because there will be no way they can control what we're doing. We have to remember there is a fellowship of individuals around the country who are like-minded and are coming out and we're getting together. One of my general rules that I advocate is that it's a very serious business, but if you get overly serious, it can become depressing. So I advise you don't come to Washington too often because we we have a long way to go there, but I have to leave Washington and come visit with you to get my energy, because this is where it is, and this is where the people are going to become alive and change the country. The purpose of all political action should be the protection and the saving of liberty. It should be geared to individual liberty. Believing strongly that if we have individual liberty and we don't have the heavy hand of government, then what we can do in our personal lives, we can strive for virtue and excellence. That should be our personal goal. That's what my belief is anyway. But that is better done in a free society. A free society is much more creative than a society that is where you just barely survive for economic reasons. Then you have the heavy hand of government over your shoulder and arresting you and taking a picture of everything you do endlessly. Now, that isn't the way. The way we have to do is release this creative energy, and when we come together, we ought to have a good time doing it because of like-minded people. But on this issue of the government surveillance of us, I am sure every one of you are aware of the fact of how many cameras we have now and how intrusive this war of drugs has been. Because right now, we're spending about over $100 billion a year on the war on drugs. We've spent $900 billion over the last 20 years. It's a huge sum of money. Last year, there were 1.7 million arrests of people who were just holding substances, no violence whatsoever. So a good line to draw, if you think you're spending too much money with too many people in prisons, maybe we ought to come up with some creative ideas about how to handle people who never created a violent act. Then I think maybe we could get to the bottom of this over-intrusiveness of knowing every single thing we do. Sometimes I believe that the drug war is associated with the war on the taxpayers because they want to know what you're doing endlessly and where you're spending your money. But the principles of liberty would remove all that. And the main problem with a government that's authoritarian is they may be well motivated, and there are. We know people in Washington, they're liberals and they're bleeding hearts, but even if you give them a little leeway, the one thing is they do not know what is best for you. They do not know. They might assume that. Us are human and all of us makes mistakes, so if you depend on me to make decisions for you, I'm going to inevitably make a mistake, and I don't want to do that. You get to make your own mistakes and be responsible for it. One interesting thing about liberty, if you have a truly free society, that you would be very tolerant of other people, whether it's their lifestyles or whatever they do, because if they don't hurt you, just leave them alone. And that, even in an economic sense, it's okay. So if we have a free society and a group of people want to get together and they want to have a socialist community and share the wealth and work together and have joint ownership of property, let them do it. It's all up to them. Once it becomes a welfare society, a socialist society, you just try to have your own libertarian society over here and take care of yourself. They won't have any part of it because they need you and they need your money and they need your energy and wealth, which means that it doesn't work for very long. It can work until we consume our wealth, and that is what we have done. We have consumed our wealth. We've known this was coming for many decades because we were living on borrowed money. And it was doomed to fail, and it still is working a little bit because there's still trust. But the trust is about gone. The credibility of government is gone. But it offers us a tremendous opportunity to stand up and know what liberty means, and know that liberty is one unit. You don't have personal, religious, and social liberty over here and economic liberty over here. You have to put them together because the right to your life means you have the right to your personal values and your money. you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for the enthusiasm and the encouragement that you have given me. But believe me, the fight is early. We have a long way to go. We are making progress, and we do not know what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow, events will change rather rapidly. Just think, although we were able to anticipate the financial crisis, boom, it just popped right up. Something on a financial arena or in the military arena can pop up tomorrow or the next day or a month from now or a year from now. So the longer time we have, the better. The more we can spread our message and get people to understand what liberty is all about. If we do that, we'll come out just fine. Thank you very much.